Welcome back to Outrage Science Bites. I'm David Beckmeyer, and this is day 4 of our 30-day challenge exploring bridging our divides. So far, we've talked about what bridging is, why outrage gets rewarded, and how shared vision can bring communities together. But today we're digging into the next big question. How do we move from talk to action? The question for today is, many are open to dialogue across divides, but shared action is harder. What helps bridging work move from talk to action? Answering that is Karissa Raskin from Listen First. Here's Karissa.
So I think this really strikes back to More in Common's recent research on the connection opportunity. And actually, they flip this dynamic a little bit in terms of they say people actually don't want to talk about political difference very much at all. It's uncomfortable. It's something that like you're told don't talk about at the dinner table, don't talk about with friends and family. People don't necessarily know how to respond. There's an element of fear, of backlash. So all of those things. But there is a greater desire to take shared action. I think that action in some ways becomes harder than the dialogue at times because everybody kind of knows how to speak. But what are those opportunities for shared action? And so what More in Common's research pointed us to is that people largely feel like there is they just don't know. They don't know what to do. They don't know how to engage with people across difference and what those opportunities for action are. And so I think, that it's programs like what Trust for Public Lands is doing with work in parks to bring diverse groups of community members together to play, to invest in public space projects that put people in direct, like contact theory is real, in direct contact with each other to do something physically active together. And from that, develop a bond. And then that bond is starting to build a sense of communication and dialogue. And from there, you start to develop a common friendship or values around something that you want to change for the betterment of your community. And so I don't think it's not a direct flip of the switch, but starting from a place that is not focused really on bringing people together to talk about political difference, but rather bringing people together to play, to have fun, or to engage in an action that's meaningful to them. This also kind of goes to one of the other questions about national service and just service in general. I think that is one of the most fundamental ways that we can bridge divides in this country because at our core, most people want to contribute to a better community where they live. They want to create a space where they have safety, where their kids and grandkids can thrive, where there is a sense of belonging for others and themselves, and they want to leave it better than where they started. And how do we do that? By investing in service-based projects. You don't show up to build a house for Habitat for Humanity because you know that everybody there has the same political alignment as you. Or you don't not show up because you heard that one person has a difference of opinion. You show up because you believe in the cause to help people have a home of their own and come out of a situation of hardship. And that is a contribution you can make to your community. And while you're there, you're probably going to meet some people that are different than you. And you're going to engage with them and you're going to let them borrow your hammer and they're going to let you borrow a band-aid when you slip and all of these things. And that's how those bonds are formed. And it's a lot harder to then have that same view of animosity or, oh my gosh, I can't believe that this person is, a blue or a red or whatever other label we're ascribing to them because they're a person that just helped you build a house for somebody in your community. And that means they're a good person in ways that probably the other wouldn't be in your mind. So yeah, I think we really need to lean into and get back to what, Robert Putnam talks so much about in the social capital theory is we need to be in places together. We need to be building those bonds of friendship and trust in order to get to the place where we have the energy, the willingness, and the I guess, consistency of action to not just be talking about differences, but actually like moving towards trust and relationships with people different than ourselves.
Right. And, and there's sort of this formal idea of service, but then there's also, like you say, all these opportunities. And one of the challenges there is like the awareness of these opportunities, discovery of these opportunities is
Mhm.
challenging. Like they're not getting the attention that they probably, I wish they could get. They're not sort of on the big news networks. They're not on, they're not in social media enough. They're not getting the likes and shares and
Right.
exposure. Instead, you get, sort of the opposite is what occupies all that space. So yeah, I
Yeah.
mean, that's one thing I try to on my show, but it's also something that I've learned, I've learned more about just from all the coalition members and the information that Listen First puts out. You just discover that there's so much of this going on. And I think if people knew both more about it, even if they're not going to participate, they know somebody's participating.
Right.
Just knowing those opportunities are out there is, I think, is like a positive thing in the world. Like instead of all the negative that we see, knowing more about that says, oh, there are people doing this. But then if you do it yourself, of course, like you say, it's a big one. An interesting side effect of that, or a sort of a side story of that that's a little bit different is, I know people that they know I have the show, so they kind of reach out when they have these different kind of experiences in their lives. And,
Hmm.
I've talked to several people with similar stories, where they have a neighbor who is maybe really far away from them in some cases, right, politically. And at first they were like, wow, I'm not even going to meet those people, or, I got to be really careful of that person and this kind of stuff.
Hmm.
And then they got to know each other a little bit. And, let's say somebody like is a good worker, or, they know home stuff, and you start, and they work together on some projects like, oh, they actually helped me fix my garage up, or they helped
Right.
me install, an air conditioner or something. Right. And you're like, and you almost, and you literally, you see like this cognitive dissonance at some point
Yeah.
where they're like, how are these two things possible that I'm really supposed to not like this person? And I still like, if in my darkest, deepest moments, I'm like, I still don't like that person in some ways, or I think they're a bad person, right? If you really caught me up honestly, I
Hmm.
might say they're a bad person still, even though like I really like them and we work well together and they're so helpful. It's like,
Right.
it's kind of odd how we can just find yourself in this space like that. It's so powerful.
It is. Yeah. There are countless stories of that. Um, But that's how I think we get to that culture shift is you open yourself up to even allowing for those experiences to happen, to not completely shut out your neighbor because they put a political sign in their front lawn that differs from yours. And yet when they offer to plow your driveway in the winter, you don't say, "Oh no, thanks, I'll shovel it myself." Like you let them lean in and support you and you reciprocate with something else. I mean, that's the humanity of it, is it not? I mean, that's how we start to foster a relationship where we can dig deeper and find out that there certainly are things that we value and agree on. They wouldn't have come over to offer to plow your driveway if they didn't want to make sure that their neighborhood, was taken care of and safe. Great. That's a great foundational place to start from for values. So yeah, I think that's really true. And to your point about, even if you're not at the place, for whatever reason, maybe it's time restriction, maybe it's a physical limitation, whatever it may be, that you aren't the one to be able to go out and provide hours of service in a physical way. Um, Reading those stories and knowing what's going on in one's own community really can shift the dynamic. It takes people from a place of despair and hopelessness where we're all just becoming apathetic and saying, well, it is what it is. And if this is the way the country's going, I'm just going to put my head down and not talk to anyone, to a place of, wow, like there's so much good and so many people are doing so many positive things, there has to be something else going on in between the what's happening here and what I'm seeing on social media and national politics maybe it isn't actually as real or bounded in truth as they'd like it to seem.
That's all for today's episode of Outrage Science Bites. Stay curious, and until next time, I'm David Beckmeyer. Thanks for listening. If you enjoy these Science Bites episodes, you may enjoy the long-form Outrage Overload podcast at outrageoverload.net.